So, welcome to the May 9th, Long Range Planning Committee meeting. For Shanae, Vice Chair, chairing in Alan Paul's stead. Would you take the role?
Yes. Yes. Alan Paul, who's not with us, Rick Shanae,
Here.
Peter Freilinger,
Here.
Robin Saunders is not here. Portia Hirschman
Here.
Jean Marie is not going to be here. Judy is going to be here. Rachel Hendrickson.
Yes, here.
Corey Fellows is not going to be here, and Don Anderson is here.
We have
Fantastic.
a quorum.
We do not.
We do not.
We need
So,
four.
When
Judy's
Judy,
coming
when
in?
Judy comes
Judy,
in.
when Judy comes in, we'll have a quorum.
Okay, so
So
should we proceed? Do we just can't take any?
we could wait on the minutes if you like, but she wasn't here, so we'll probably, I can push minutes to next time,
Okay,
if that's okay.
Yeah.
Cause she went.
all right, so thoughts were done, roll call done. We're gonna pass on the minutes, given the lack of the quorum. Item 4 is general public comment. Here to have
Don't have any of
members
that.
of the public here. So item 5, discuss status of comp plan recommendations and strategies for future 2025 projects, public comment, 3-minute limit. There were a number of handouts. That people reviewed.
Did you just call me April?
What's that?
Did you call me April?
No. Did I?
I don't know. Did you say? Wait, it's okay. Robin calls me Amber.
I didn't call you. I may have called you other things, but I don't think I.
Paul.
So, Autumn,
Yes.
the floor is yours.
So I just attached the charter information, the council goals, the implementation spreadsheet. I update this sort of sporadically. And then the comprehensive plan strategies. And the yellow highlighted are the things that were passed to long range planning committee when the comp plan was approved. I think when I first got here, you all had spent several meetings, quite some time going through the implementation table and creating that
That spreadsheet.
in the spreadsheet. So I'll just open that up. And we can take a look.
Are the young highlights your?
They're my highlights. They just coincide with what you all have on the spreadsheet for projects. And so we can go over this and or talk about where we are and then talk about next steps for this committee and the rest of your work plan for 2025. So a lot of these, I don't know if you had a chance to look at them. We've made great progress in many of these areas. Outlying areas west of the turnpike, we have the open space plan adopted. That was adopted last month. That one really takes care of a lot of these. Provision and extension of public sewer and water should be encouraged. This is not included in council goals. I think there's an understanding that this committee recommends we look at that, but that wasn't moved forward. This number 4, the majority of new residential development should take place in growth areas. Our existing zoning is really taking care of this for us. And then we do have the rate of growth ordinance. In June, I am scheduled to provide an update to council. It's our 2-year in. And so it re-ups next July. And so in June, council will have that discussion if they want to amend to change it or it keeps going. It seems to be working. We have the rate of growth areas divided up into the 3 areas. The area 1 is essentially all pretty, I'd say 75% town, R2, RF. We have 25 per year and we run out of those. But then they re-up every July. And then area 2 is Dunstan, Eastern Village, all of Route 1, any residential along those ways. And we're still pretty good on that. And then the Downs has their own set of, so it's been really easy to manage. Other than area 1, we did run out. We did have some permits, so we had to turn away, but
Yeah.
I think that was the idea.
I think it would be good, since we are at year 2 and we have to either update it next June for this group, especially as we explore at our June meeting as well, housing diversity and options. Like, I just feel like what happened with Marshview this week, either we need to recommit to the comp plan around where we want affordable housing or be clear on more specificity, I think, of like what we want where and what makes sense considering our growth areas. And I think all of that to say, like, it would be nice to have this group over the next year kind of deliberate to help us figure out if we're gonna update the rate of growth ordinance and change it. What makes sense based on where we want to see development and make sure we can enable it in a way that works for our community and is practical in some ways. Because again, I think a lot of reasons why this particular project didn't pass, I think, was concerns about its size as a specific location.
Which was a town and village center
Yeah,
designed for high density development.
yes,
So
but the current, like, lights and everything, I think just
Yeah, the traffic
can get a
is
huge challenge there for,
the turning and who could go in what direction.
it doesn't mean it can't be there, but it just means like, does there need to be some discussion on like what makes more sense given some of the real limitations that exist in that particular part of town?
If I could weigh in for a minute, since I was part of that discussion on the planning board. My sense from the planning board members is that it was not specifically the design. I think while the neighbors had a concern about 4 stories, I think that was not a specific concern of many on the planning board. I think that was something that was manageable, so I don't think it was a question of design, but it really was a question of access. The neighbors really didn't understand a lot of what had been developed. In other words, what the potential was, what the care was in terms of stormwater. Some people were very concerned about stormwater, not thinking that there was absolutely no stormwater provisions there to begin with. And that the group was going to actually protect the marsh better than what was there. And other people were concerned about the height of the buildings, the appearance, it was a fascinating, long hearing on the planning board, but it really was a question of managing access. And if you're concerned, especially since it was housing 55 plus, there was concern that the access was not there. And that had been expressed in the joint workshop hearing with the town council when it first came up. That concern about access, was loud and clear. And when the project came before us, there was nothing that had been done about that. And when you talk about access, you're talking about the It was right only turn right only, the left- in, Okay. right out. Yeah, In other words, as you start to look at how people would get there. yeah. I just wanted to be sure. Yeah, that's what it was. So, the amenities there, the fact that it was on a bus line, there was doctor's offices, there were restaurants, there was a grocery store. On first blush, it was a good place. On second blush, taking a look at the concerns of access, all of a sudden, there were a lot of red flags. Not necessarily from the concerns about the visual of the arrangement. What my testimony was, what I simply said is, this is great, wrong place. Put it someplace else, please.
Well, I want to be careful about how that comes across though, because wrong place says, why is that part of the town village construct then? If the town village construct can't handle any development at that corner, then we shouldn't have that as part of a growth area. Full stop.
Yeah,
If that's a permanent issue, that's not part of a growth area.
I think then you need to take a look at divided highways and what goes on either side of the divided highway.
Or put
In terms of
differently,
ability to,
we need more of a planning concept for our town and village centers that address the transport issues that are affiliated with each one of those. Because unless we do that, then we can't advance the town's goal or the stated goal of the town council to address growth housing and land use.
I think that's a great point, and I think that's, I think that's what this particular development just highlighted is that.
Yeah.
While in spirit and in intent, yes, it makes sense to say, let's focus on growth in those areas, but again, this is where I'm getting to like practicality a little bit more, where. There are pinch points, and I think that, and I don't think it's the entire TBC, it's that particular. Lot is a
Well,
pinch
that-
point.
That's
that
why
one at
we
8
really
corners,
wanted to
actually.
do the Dunstan Village.
Yeah,
plan.
exactly.
And that Dunstan Village plan that we talked about doing
Mm.
would take into account all of these
Yeah.
things. And we could fix if we needed to tweak the zoning, if we needed to add opportunities for changes like a roundabout or
And
something
prior-
different to make
prioritize
things
transportation.
work. Yeah.
Because I think it is gonna be prioritizing changes to the transport corridor there, because if, and just mentally after seeing the planning committee, moving up and down Route 1, you really have very few locations that don't hit the same exact issues
Exactly, yeah.
prior to Dunstan, to whatever that, where Dunstan Crossing is, or
Mhm.
where the pub is.
Oh, north of Oak Hill. North of.
Yeah, but now we're not in that same town village. Yeah, shove it on the
In
other side
other
of
words,
town.
but on Route 1, there is that center turn lane
But my
that
point is,
allows,
Mhm.
and the Dunstan,
and there's a center turn lane when you get down to the Dunstan pub area as well,
Yeah.
which helps. But again, a 55+ community facing onto what is now a 5-lane. Corridor, and expecting them to be able to cross the street or things like that. You're gonna come up with the same safety concerns and the same general concerns. So again, I would say that this just highlights the overdue nature of the more comprehensive and wrong word.
Route 1. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's a
Well,
village, it's
yeah,
a
and-
specialized
Yeah,
neighborhood.
because I can see the same issues emerging frankly in 8 Corners too. As that grows out and you've got a lot of, well, they're 2-lane roads, they're getting increasingly congested 2-lane roads with very tight turning radiuses, very tight. Areas for traffic accumulation and signal accumulation and things like that. So yeah, I think that's what I come down to.
Yeah, Dunstan might be a great candidate for a road diet and a couple of, get rid of some lights and some roundabouts and really create a village that you don't come to pass through town, you come to go to Dunstan and to the beaches. You wanna pass through town, you get on the turnpike.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those, I mean, there's a lot of ideas,
Mm-hmm.
but that it's still in my CIP request.
Well, the other
For
thing
next year.
that came up too on this was, in the comments on heights and appearance and things like that. Did people miss the memo? I mean, we are focusing our growth in Oak Hill, we are focusing our growth in Dunstan and 8 Corners. You're going to get this development. Look at what we've got in 8 Corners now.
and I would say that people missed the memo, that the neighbors did not have an understanding.
Yeah.
Of,
General public does not.
they, of what a growth area meant. It was, well, if you viewed it, you saw the number of people that were saying it, but that's, when I came here 20 years ago, when I came here 30 years ago, I had, no, things are changing and there's a lack of understanding
Well, when they came
what a
here,
growth area means.
when they came there 4 years ago, there were 3 larger restaurants, a school, and it was a growth area. It was not equivalent to Oak Hill, but not that far off the mark. And to me, that indicates that there's a comms issue that we have to deal with. Whether that's from the town council or whether it's from us as long range planning, we don't have the leader anymore, but it's an outreach process where we say, this is what it means to have these growth focus areas. It means that west of the turnpike, you're getting fewer buildings, which is kind of what we want. We enable our open space plan. We have all these advantages of the growth, but it does mean that we're going to focus the growth that we're going to have. You people who already live in town want amenities. People who don't yet live in town need housing, and everyone needs housing for staffing the businesses that we have already in town. So it's going to go here in 4-story buildings that are tastefully designed in mixed use development. And start getting into the notions of mixed use as well.
Or you could even, through the village process, you may determine that 45 feet 4 stories is too high for this area, and maybe it's a 3-story and it has a gable roof and there's an actual look about it. That's what that village, you know,
That
so
gets us
design,
back into
yeah,
that.
so it has an aesthetic sort of standard, because we talked about each village being a little bit unique.
Yes.
Remember, it came up when we did I do the architectural design standards.
Exactly.
We were really struggling because we wanted each area to look specific.
And it reminded me of a project that the planning board passed quite a few years ago. In Eastern Village, and the apartments that now lead to Ward Street. And there was concern about the height. Remember?
Oh, yeah, oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the location next to the residential area. We resolved the issue, by that building that was closest to the residential area. The top floor was studio apartments rather than full apartments, so they had lower roofs, less bulk, and came under the 45 or whatever it
Well,
was.
that's the height of the highest one, resident.
Yeah, so that we actually found a way architecturally to get it into what the ordinances said. Didn't start that way, but it ended up that way, so. I wasn't worried. In other words, I wasn't particularly concerned about the height. If there was three feet over, yeah, we can figure this out.
I think this is a communications opportunity, but at the same time, the reality is anytime any project goes
Yeah.
anywhere, we're just gonna hear from residents, specifically the ones that really don't want it there.
Mhm.
And so I think that is just where probably excessive communication is just needed, just to be like, hey, we know you don't like it, but this is where the town has decided that we're gonna invest because of all the benefits of not putting it somewhere else in town. It's like when I heard a lot of people say for this project, put it in the outskirts of town,
Yeah,
and it's like, that's not really,
Well, that was really about, I don't wanna see these people in my neighborhood. I'm
There's
gonna
a little
say
bit of that,
it. There was
yeah.
a lot of that, and
there
a
was a
lot of
lot
that
of that,
was,
frankly, yeah.
oh, but traffic's bad, oh, but save the marsh. And so,
Yeah.
Which again, there was a lack of understanding.
well, and a lack of
What was
excuses
proposed.
being made.
Correct, yeah, it was a very, very thin veneer of, I
Yeah,
don't like traffic.
and it was super, the one fatal flaw that this project has is the ride in, ride out.
yeah.
And that, because people are going to be living there,
And that's
they
gonna be
have to
true of
return, they
anything
can't,
that
they're not just
Yeah.
shopping there and leaving
Yeah.
and figuring out how to get there,
Yeah.
they have to return and leave in the morning.
And the trouble is, exactly that, point. Anything on the south side of Route
gonna
One
have
is
the same
gonna have the
issue.
same issue, yeah.
Housing wise,
Well, yeah, the housing wise or significant.
well, like we did the
significant
bank,
traffic.
you're still gonna have
That's on
issues,
the north
but
side.
you can do.
The
But they
bank-
only have a ride in, ride out as well, but we can accommodate that for retail and commercial uses.
But for
Again-
example, I don't think we would have done it again for, a rodeo. The amount of traffic that comes in and out of there, and the problems that they have, and having to route traffic back through
Through
Broad Turn
Dyer
Road,
Drive
yeah.
and down,
That was a way of addressing it. But my point is that corridor there in general is designated high growth.
Yeah.
And we can't.
We don't accommodate it. in the
Correct.
town.
But I would say though, there, again, to get back to the thin area issue, both the planning board and the town council have to have strong backbones in addressing the NIMBY issue. And this was, you're right, I don't want those people in my neighborhood, which was a disturbing.
It was an
article.
assumption they were section 8, I think.
Yeah.
So, and if they were,
Exactly,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, that was,
It was very disturbing.
a disappointing reflection on some numbers.
Yeah, I don't wanna generalize that is the way everybody feels, but I guess there are people in the community who can feel that way, so.
Oh, yeah, there are, no, there's.
And calling it, you've got two different things. Affordable housing can be any number of things versus workforce housing. And so you get a whole lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding in the midst of that.
There were many things that could have been worked out in a way that would have enabled the community to understand. Stormwater and protection of the marsh. That could have been taken care of in terms of how the public understood what was happening and the fact that it was actually gonna likely benefit the marsh.
Yeah.
Is it because it's South Portland housing? I mean, is there?
You
some
know,
of that?
I don't know whether it could be, oh, they only build houses for,
Yeah, I mean, I just
those
wonder if
people.
I agree,
there
yeah.
was an assumption made.
I heard some feedback on that as well, on that exact issue. It's like, well, look at what they've done in South Portland. And they referenced the developments in on Route 1 there by across the street from the hotels, from the motels.
Oh, yeah.
Right by the turnpike entrance. And it was very much a thinly veiled, they built houses for tomorrow.
Yeah.
I
Just to circle back to the recommendation and action, like again, I go back to. We have our current GMO, we've kind of said this is
Yeah.
what we wanna enable. I would be interested in this group's debate between now and end of next year. That basically looks at what we have today, looks at those growth areas, takes into account some of these complexities that really do exist until we have more longer term transportation.
Mhm.
To maybe help guide a little bit what the next iteration of the GMO could be. And it may be, the recommendation may be, hey, it's fine, keep it the way it is, but I do think, I agree with Peter that we've made a commitment that that is where we want growth. But we also have to kind of think about the practicality of what exists today and without some of these major transportation overhauls that are likely needed in that area. How do we grow responsibly until that's in place? And, I still personally think it would be great to see an affordable housing project on that plot. It just needs to be probably smaller than what was proposed. And so it's not that I think that's not a good place for it. It's just the whole project overall with the current issue to me just felt like too much to.
It's interesting. I would be partnering with the folks who own the computer repair / tattoo parlor location. Using that property as an entrance for a more bigger development.
They tried.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was what we told them to do.
Yeah.
I have a question. How close is that site? How accessible is it for people who live there to get groceries?
There's a grocery.
yeah, there's on the vine right
Yeah,
across the
yeah,
street.
it's
Yeah.
close to a lot of amenities.
It was a really nice spot.
It really is a great location minus the current traffic, yeah.
See, it seems to me, for instance, that there are two very large parking lots right there across the street where we would not have a question
Yeah.
of access. On the Vine area, there's a lot of space. And in the Girly's Antiques and there's a lot of space. There's space for a couple buildings.
Yeah.
Tall buildings there where there wouldn't be a question because people can get out onto Payne Road. And turn in either direction up and down Route 1.
It's that south side of Route 1.
That's,
Yeah, and it really, it is that south side that extends really to effectively the Ace Harbor. You've got, you don't have a left
Very
turning
tight,
lane.
yeah.
Yeah, you've got multiple
well, it's very
barriers.
tight, and in some cases, it's a divided highway.
Correct, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the issue, so. yeah.
And the problem is that the NIMBYs will use environmental issues as
Red herrings.
red herrings.
But that's
exactly.
where you have to kind of trust the planning board to enforce the ordinances. Because, once you take a look at the stormwater plans, the protections that are there, the planning board is gonna say yes on that because we understand our obligation.
So.
The
as-
NIMBYs is still gonna say no.
That's
and
right.
It's kind of like, yeah, however, this
So
meets our guidelines. This
does
meets our
the,
ordinance.
does the town have an environmental quality review act of its own, or does it?
We do, yeah, we have.
And that's- so
stormwater.
that's
We have
been-
to go through DEP, we have our own.
So this proposal has been through that.
No, it was just getting started, but they did meet our wetland setbacks and they were going through their DEP permitting and they actually had exceeded the chapter 500 requirements.
Mhm.
with what they were proposing.
And then the issue becomes that the opposition, at least what I have encountered in my past life, was that the opposition would use environmental quality review to try to delay the project out of existence.
I think that is something we have to be careful and see, right, because we have really focused on conservation as a
Of
priority
course.
and focus, and
And the marsh is a centerpiece.
we can have both, right? We can have both. And so we just, I know that was one of Councilor Christian's departing comments, was his concern about how conservation could become a red herring, like you said, for any business development or growth that is actually good and important for our community. So, yeah.
Well, the people in the area certainly didn't complain about the 7-unit $1,000,000 housing development that just went off on Pine Point Road. Those were the right people moving in.
Yeah.
And it was closer to the marsh and constructed new pond and stormwater drainage within 400 feet of the marsh. The idea that didn't attract the same level of concern that this attracted simply because of the workforce or affordable housing developments of it was again a very poor reflection on certain members of our.
But you all are having their workshop on June 4th
Yep.
for the affordable housing.
So first off, I think I'd like to propose, and maybe it's to John, it's to you, that the council seriously consider the CIP request for the design study, the sort of the planning study for Dunstan Corners, as a way of moving this to both this issue for Dunstan, but also the conceptual issues in general for the town and village concepts materially forward. And without that, I don't know how we get really that project done.
Yeah.
So
that might be Autumn, for us to, are you gonna be participating in the workshop for affordable housing?
When is
Maybe
that?
it's on June 4th. I'm assuming part of that conversation will be like, oh, what do we need to do?
Yeah.
I think this is probably
Yeah.
something maybe if we can remember to bring it up and just say, you have a plan, we need to support that plan.
Just makes me so angry. I grew up in public housing projects in New York City, and I didn't grow 2 heads or anything like that. It just really makes
Well, I don't
me
know,
upset.
I'm taking a good.
All because of those projects.
But I do think that people misunderstand, and the fear factor drives more than the reality. I mean, I lived in the South with integration and schools, and the fear factor was huge.
That's right.
And it was, nothing. So I don't know. It is a community issue, but I think the inherent issue for the town is looking at Route 1 and saying, okay, what needs to happen here in order for growth? Because you hear people complaining about growth, but if you want to concentrate growth in order to make things sustainable, you've got to be able to address the traffic and Route 1 is.
And I think the town has done, and I applaud the council for coming up with the GMO in its current form and the notion of growth versus non-targeted areas.
Yeah.
I think that has been very well done. But there is a segment of town, we gotta face it, who actually want no growth to the point where they would actually violate people's constitutional rights to use their property.
That's right. I'm the last one here.
Yeah,
Close the doors after me.
and close it, that contingent will never be happy.
That's right.
So we have to plan for the needs of the town as a whole and kind of put those thoughts to the side.
And also you want to get this sort of, you're always going to lose an extreme. And so you need to get those who are not on the extremes on board.
And actors.
So we want to get through all this stuff, so I think we beat this to death. The last time I looked, the ordinances don't say anything about who's gonna live in a project, so that's obviously a non-issue in terms of approval. But I do think the bigger issue is if we designated sections of town for growth, yet we have significant, in this case, a traffic related issue. We have to address traffic.
Yes.
And we've been talking about forever.
And the transportation committee has
So
Spent a lot of time.
we have to do some work.
Yeah.
On that
Absolutely.
particular issue. Can't say you gotta build housing here and then not be able to do it. Because
Now,
Right, we can't tell you,
Now.
you do what we want, and then, oh, we were just kidding, we didn't really
which,
want it.
which speaks to supporting a robust transit system.
Oh, yeah.
So shall we move on to the rest of this page we get through?
Let's see, so we have, I'm not really sure what number that one was.
That was number four. I
Okay.
think.
So then we have the identity and livability. Again, I have future village plans in CIP. This one really does this. Future zoning changes will be adopted as necessary to implement I think future village plans do this as
Yeah.
well. I think those smaller bites of town really accomplish a lot of the goals of the comp plan.
The only thing that on this one, on the future zone changes, and also number 5 was certain extent too, I think it's number 5 or is it number 6? That one there, you've got your highlighted.
There's no 5 or. It goes
The
to
numbers
4 to
don't
6.
really, they go in with other things, sorry, I don't.
We've talked a bit about the flip side of the high growth areas, which is the rural districts. And again, I'll look to John and the priorities. The rural districts really are truly not on the priority list for that. But I don't want us as a group to lose sight of the fact that that we've identified in the past that the RF district is a big monolithic concept that covers most of the town and needs some work. And that goes along with some of the other districts on the other side of on the west side of the turnpike, which are adjacent to the RF district. We're kind of set up with the idea that there would be future development once the sewer came over, but sewer hasn't come over, so they're acting and they quack like an RF district. So that's, I know, not on our calendar probably for the next 12 months, but I don't want to lose sight of that. As
I
part of our
still
work.
think that we should address the RF on the east side of the turnpike, because.
Yeah, well, there's that too, yeah.
Yeah, because we have property along the beach and different places
Yeah,
that's
and-
zoned RF, it's not
Yeah.
RF.
Yeah,
so, but
exactly.
It's a good, for now, it's a good safety net, because it is in the rate of growth, it's slow,
Yep.
it's kind of like, it's a holding zone, if you will, until we get to it, but we don't want to forget to get to it.
Yeah. And that has fallen off, but that was a much, I think concerns about the erosion of the rural areas of town was a very big part of the comprehensive planning process. It's gotten a little quieter, I think, but I think it's still, it was still there and it's still.
It's probably, maybe it's gotten quieter because there hasn't been any really large, there have not been any subdivisions going in
Yeah.
outside of what Peaceful Acres.
But you don't
Without
want it
gravel.
nibbled to death by ducks either.
Right.
That's right.
Let's see, and then we have,
Well, we have red herrings and ducks.
again, this one's, set guidelines and policies that will guide future development to growth areas. A lot of these are the same, not conservation areas, so the open space plan, zoning, those same kind of things. Continue to grow, so many of these are things. We did just put in, stream protection, that'll go through May 21st, just adding to our stream protection overlay for Red Brook and Phillips Brook.
I would say the ordinance, I guess this group did work on it with the wetland setback ordinance, to me kind of fits into that too.
Let's see, farms and open spaces, to your point, Peter, the open space plan does incorporate
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
Building placement should consider scenic views, we don't have anything for that. Periodically review policies, ordinance and standards, so we did LD 2003, rate of growth, wetland setbacks, impact fees, transportation assessment, we're finalizing that. I think this is just an ongoing thing we continually do. And then we get into this goal about, future land use patterns will create opportunities for efficient delivery of municipal services and infrastructure. So this really gets back into our conversation, the same conversation, it's kind of a trend. Foster walkable mixed use development patterns in the growth and, on the growth and conservation map, increase tax revenue, minimize infrastructure costs compared to low density decentralized development patterns. So again, there's a CIP request for trails and sidewalk, master plan, that really helps, I think.
Which
with
nice
that one.
presentation, by the way, online of your
Oh, thanks.
video.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tom asked me, he said, did you have a teleprompter? I said, no, I had a Jamie Fitch. He was like, come with me.
That was very good.
So I think the village plans really go into this too,
The other ones,
for
and
specific places.
I've had a couple of conversations oddly on this one. It's come up when we're thinking about Eastern Village. It's come up with thinking about the new development at Eight Corners. There reaches a point in our multifamily development sizes that I think we should probably have a mandate within the zoning ordinance to have amenities within the within the development area. So that you're not forcing 200 or 250 new people to always get in their car to go to a restaurant or a convenience store or get their laundry done or whatever that might be. And I know we can't mandate that thou shalt have in.
Okay.
Well, yeah, you can, and it strikes me that the size of development on the corner there at Eight Corners, thinking about it in light of traffic and the rest, you're gonna create either a lot of pedestrian traffic going to Hannaford's or to around, or down 114 to get to Nonesuch, or we could have mandated that they have facilities within that footprint, that emergent footprint, that would have reduced the need for folks to get to their cars or walk in a very congested area. So and Eastern Village to me is a classic example of that, where we've actually, it's nigh on impossible to get out of Eastern Village to go to Oak Hill, except through an incredibly congested and lousy intersection on Eastern Road and 207.
I can get off of Commerce.
Yeah,
And Ward.
and swing around, and then you're.
Commerce and Ward, both give you.
And you're going then, and you've gone now probably 6 times the amount of distance to travel to, if you were going to say, the Common Grounds. If you were to drive from Eastern Village to Common Grounds, you'd probably have to drive 6 times as much, road distance to do the air miles that you're trying to get to.
But it's pretty easy to walk.
But you can walk there.
Well, you can, but again,
That's what I do, walk.
but we're a winter town. And if I'm gonna do something other than just go to Common Grounds, like go to Hannaford's or go anywhere else, I'm gonna get in my car.
Now, the plus is about Eastern Village is their sidewalks. The negative
I agree.
about Eight Corners, there are no sidewalks.
Yep, agreed.
So you've
there's-
got a totally different.
No, and that's why each village is different, right? We're each, but I would say that if we were to do Eastern Village all over again, we should have placed some restaurants, amenities, et cetera, in there for the number of people and the number of.
But if you look at the ordinance regarding
I know.
the neighborhood plan, it says you can't have.
I know,
commercial.
which is one of the things I wanted to put on the table. That neighborhood planning requirement it actually prohibits mixed use developments in by and large.
Well, the unfortunate thing about planning in a whole is that we're not in control of everything. I could fix it. I could fix it if we owned it all and had all the power. We could master plan the whole town.
But
It
a
would be a
traditional
lovely thing.
neighborhood plan
It's
is
so
not
hard.
allowed because the
Pieces.
streets are narrower. I mean, there are a whole lot of
Well,
other things that go on. in
A
there.
traditional neighborhood plan, though, is built around the automobile. So we don't have to approve traditional neighborhood planning. And we could have in our ordinance that such plans are specifically to be avoided. So I'm just saying, especially in the county
East Village is
area.
actually a really lovely and nice example of a neighborhood. It's just, to Peter's point, the neighborhood's not next to the traditional downtown that would be. I used to live in a very traditional downtown neighborhood, a lot like Eastern Village, in a suburb out of Fort Worth. But I could walk to work and I could walk to the park and I could walk to the grocery store and I could walk to other things because it was all built in the same time frame. And so what you get with Eastern Village is, ooh, let's do this new urbanist idea. It's really cool. That was so pretty. Why can't we emulate it? But they didn't do the other part.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't always work unless you get all the parts.
And they didn't connect into the existing networks that could have allowed for that or.
So what happens to residents or are handicapped or don't have a car, or I mean, some reason can't drive to the amenities.
They end up not looking.
Yeah,
They
they
live somewhere
are
else.
trying to find somewhere to live like Marsh and perhaps where they can have access to a bus or.
Yeah.
I get calls all the time from people looking for places to live. How can they get to things? Angela gets a lot of calls. How can I get to the library? How can I get to these? I mean, and Maine is what, is it the oldest state in the country? Or the
Well,
second oldest state? I mean, it's aging.
Oh, aging.
Yeah, aging,
Age-wise,
yeah,
we're the
yes.
oldest.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really different demographic to try to plan for. To help people.
The
Okay,
irony is Scarborough Dennis doing exactly what,
Correct,
well,
Good.
concentrated within the project.
correct. And as that grows out, those amenities, the people I talk to who live there are getting excited.
Yeah.
They're
it's
really,
the fun part, right?
exactly. So,
So how does this all tie in with the idea of a kind of a town center that we've been talking about on and off?
So that's Scarborough Downs, you're right.
The
Yeah.
Scarborough Downs, but there's also,
well, or it could be Dunstan if we had more multifamily development in Dunstan.
right,
Or it could be Oak Hill if we had more multifamily.
and then how do you, we're talking about making a more walkable community. How do you get across the road?
Well, if you think about Oak Hill, I'll take Oak Hill.
Mhm.
So if you think of Oak Hill, the corner that's inside of Route 1 and 114,
Mhm.
all that with, if we built if we built sidewalks and pathways into the Hannafords, you'd never have to cross a major arterial.
What happens to the kids who, after school, cross over?
Well, you don't solve that problem, but what I'm saying is that wedge gets solved with crosswalks and.
Right.
We've built some traffic calming features on 114 that allow the kids to get across there now. I think we've also focused in the town campus a lot of amenities that keep the
Yes.
kids from crossing the street.
Yes,
So you got parks, you got skate park, you got library, etc. But to your point, the way that the town was built means that there's an arterial crossing at some point that you're gonna have to manage around and figure out how to do it the right way.
I understand that.
But we can be much better and more thoughtful about within the wedges that don't cross the arterials,
Mhm.
building the things that need to be there to keep people out of their cars and walking around.
Right. I know a lot of kids go to, what is it called? It's right across the parking lot from, O'Reilly's Cure. What is the? it's like-
Common grounds.
Yeah.
Scarborough.
They go
Scarborough.
there either around lunchtime or after school.
They're closed after school though.
Yeah.
That's true.
Closed
So
at
I
3,
see
I
them
think.
sometimes
I don't
when
approve
I'm
of.
done with the meeting here, I go over there and there are a lot of kids who spend some free time there. So yeah, there are all kinds of things.
So let's go back.
Maybe we should build a coffee shop, it's probably new school.
Can I work there instead?
But-
Fancy and pastries.
No.
I'm here for pastries.
My husband's a
Um,
pastry chef. so-
Oh, he's coming to work with me too.
But there is something that I didn't want to lose sight of, and again, I think this actually does relate to the growth and housing side. It would be a good idea as we take a look at the town and village zoning to make sure that we're not discouraging, but encouraging mixed use.
Yes.
And encouraging developments that are not sole single purpose developments.
So I am getting an idea for a project that we could do with this group that doesn't require CIP, and maybe it is, we start looking at our specific TBC zoning, and we'll pick out the little pods of town, and we won't hyper focus on specific parcels, but we'll be like, okay, is this use? Does this work? Because it was written quite some time ago. Is
Mhm.
this meeting today's market demands? Can people actually achieve this? Because we do have some things that people that build commercial don't typically build multifamily.
Right.
People that do residential subdivisions typically don't do coffee shops.
Correct.
So we
Yeah.
do have some requirements. So maybe that could be our focus
We thought about that last year when we were, it was something down at the canning site, probably weed related, everything's weed related down at canning site. But we had said one of the values of the town village, zone is it does allow us to think in terms of specific parcels, because by definition, there's a budget of those. There's only a limited number of parcels in any given TDC zone. And so we can think about them individually in a way that is difficult when we're looking at the RSA.
Yeah, but we're also ready for redevelopment too, so maybe.
Yeah.
The reason I would say
Sure.
not looking at specific parcels is so we can very high level say, what is it that we actually want? And maybe we don't even look at our TVC zone, maybe we just think a little bit outside the box and say, in an ideal setting, what would Dunstan look like? And we brainstorm. And then we say, do we have the ordinances in place that get us there?
Yeah.
And maybe we can do a little, our baby version of what, and so we would at least be ready when we got a consultant on board to do the outreach and start to do the charrettes with the public.
Yeah, well, I think that makes a
And
ton
I
of sense.
think Dunstan, because of the land there on Broad Turn, there's a lot of open land, there's a lot of opportunity for redevelopment. That would be my area I would start first. So, yeah. Does that sound like maybe a good project for us?
Yeah,
to
because you
focus
got the
on?
Habitat for Humanity project further on down Broad
Yeah.
Turn, so you've got a, already you have a mixed use of
So-
housing.
It would just be a conversation we would start. Maybe we're just, I don't know, I'll have to think about how we'd start,
I
but
like the idea, it changes you put it into a different frame. I like that.
because I think some of our zone, our zoning, if the zoning we had were where I came from down south, oh, we'd be completely built out. We have the idea behind the zoning is fantastic, but we may just have a little bit different environment. So maybe it's time for a little tune-up on what we have in place versus the practicality of it. So that might be a good exercise. Let's see. So then we get into diversity and characteristics of existing and emerging neighborhoods. Attractive mixed use centers. So many of these are really about making sure things kind of fit in. This one about, oh, this one is another one. Refine the number of defined uses into broader category types. This one, I think you all were, I think Karen was working on this with you all, with like the commercial uses and whatnot. It's really a tedious project. It's kind of boring too, so I don't know if we want to work. I think what we just talked about sounds like more time.
It is, but that's exactly what she was thinking about.
But it needs to, it'll happen, but
Yeah.
I think maybe it can happen as an outcome of our other discussions rather than let's just consolidate uses.
Well, it's come out of both what SEDCO deals with Planning Committee deals with, what the zoning board deals with, primarily around special exception uses
Mhm.
and the diversity of numbers of special exception uses versus the approved uses versus prohibited uses. So I think there's and you're right, it is tedious, but there was a desire to get some rationality around those three categories across, in particular, commercial development stuff.
And we could look at it, but that would be one I think I would just give you a draft to respond to.
Which would
It
be fun, yeah.
Yeah, that wouldn't be very exciting to work on that. I think it's great. No offense.
I'm the chairman of the zoning board, stop that, yeah. Love that stuff.
I could make you not have to meet, we could
You could
reduce the
meet.
number of meetings exponentially though. And then review town policies, ordinances and standards, including GMO, blah, blah, blah. We did our commercial design standards. That has been really good because I get compliments from people like, this is easy to follow. We know what you expect. Council just approved our EDCS ordinance updates in response to some developer feedback. So, and we reorganized the table, so it's gonna be easier to use.
This one, number three, though, what we're talking about. which
It's a
is-
continual, right? I think you could do something like this. This is just a nonstop, always doing this. And I think John, if you quit seeing me at council, it means I'm not doing this anymore, so.
I don't want
So, I mean, I think as long as you keep seeing me, this number 3 is always gonna be happening. This one is one that I think really we should fix too. We should right size the zoning. We
Yeah,
have a lot of areas in town that don't have the right zoning on them and they're developed neighborhoods like Maple Ave. And I think I told you an example one time that really bothered me. a gentleman in Maple Ave neighborhood has a house and he has a vacant lot. And because that vacant lot has been combined, there's some weird state laws with it, it's all one now. And so he can't subdivide it and have another house built on there. But it's exactly the same lot as every other house in the
Yeah.
neighborhood. It's
But it's a-
perfect infill development,
Yeah.
right?
But it's an R2, and R2
And it's-
requires at least a $20,000. Square foot.
And
yacht
every
size
home in
process.
that neighborhood is non-conforming.
No, and we've got that in Pleasant Hill,
Yeah.
we've got that in Blue Point, we got that, yeah. Every neighborhood, and there are a lot of great neighborhoods in town built before 1991,
Mhm,
essentially is non-conforming.
mhm.
And so this was something I think I don't want to lose sight of.
Yeah. This would kill the zoning board agenda by half.
Yes,
Because
yes,
people who want to build a porch can't build the porch
right.
on a house that's in one of those.
Because they wouldn't have the setbacks.
Mhm.
Yeah, they wouldn't have the
Okay.
setbacks, and they've already, the lots are already typically built to the maximum or over the maximum lot usage.
Right,
For the post 91 zone.
right.
Whereas if you look at it in the neighborhood, yeah, every house has a porch. Why not give that house a porch too? Somebody forgot to put a porch on in 1956. And
So
now they
the
never
original
have.
houses were grandfathered in,
Yeah, they were all right.
right?
We put zoning on top of them after they were
I
built, and
understand.
so this one, it's not really, I mean, we know where the areas are. It's more of an
Yeah.
outreach about making sure the public understands what we're doing.
Correct.
That we're not actually hurting you, we're helping you, but
Yeah.
that is the part of that that's a little trickier.
If, I guess. I think I know the answer to this. But if you have a ZBA, right, a zoning board of appeals, if they start granting. Things like a porch.
Mhm.
Will that set a precedent for, say, building a McMansion?
No, that doesn't. It could set a precedent for future porches.
Okay.
And we have an obligation as a town
Mhm.
not to be approving variances of a specific type repeatedly.
Right, Right.
But it's not a slippery slope where a porch becomes an addition, becomes a McMansion.
right,
So, no.
okay,
Not,
thank you.
I'm not as familiar with the ZBA process, but Autumn. You know, is there like an easy path for things like adding a porch versus,
It's kind of the same
Adding
thing.
an addition.
Yeah. like, I'm just wondering, is that an interim step before the stuff is cleaned up to create a pathway? Where there are non-conforming uses that really just don't make sense that people can avoid?
You know, the zoning, that part of the zoning adjudication process is in state law,
Okay,
so,
Mhm.
yeah.
It depends on the type of appeal that someone's going for. So
Yeah.
there are some easier types of appeals versus.
Can you build a history of some of that and say, this is why this makes sense to make this change?
Yeah, once a year, I try to sit down, do an inventory of what we've done in the past year, and then talk to town council, or talk to Autumn about, hey. We've been doing a lot of this.
We have a lot of those, like.
can we make some changes? to the
yeah.
regs?
Right.
Oh, let's see. So then we have this one again, review its policies, ordinances, standards, including impact fee, yada, yada, to identify there are no impediments to desired types of development. This one, the Housing Alliance is involved in this. This is where I wanted to mention affordable housing direction is a 2025 council goal, and they are having that workshop to kick that discussion off.
Notice it says traffic reports.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
That sounds
yeah,
familiar.
it sounds familiar, right? Continue to differentiate the number of residential permits that can be issued in the low growth area. I think I really like the rate of growth ordinance that we came up with. I personally worked really hard on it with John and Nick and Tom and Karen, and it seems to be really working. I really like the way it's divided up. Continue, let's see. So again, that's coming up this summer to talk about with council. Let's see, this one, the town should expand the inclusionary zoning requirements to other growth areas and identify opportunities to require developments in low growth areas or rural areas to contribute to affordable housing. Again, I think that's part
So
of
it's
that.
under your vision 3.
Right, I think it's all part of that affordable housing conversation.
Yeah.
Same for these, support senior housing opportunities, those This one, review occupancy restrictions for accessory dwellings. This one is interesting because comes up a lot with the short-term rental conversation. So if you have a single family home, you can have an accessory dwelling unit, but you can only have 2 people that live in it. And they have to rent it for more than 28 days. But the 2 people, I think, must have come up with the comp plan. Is that appropriate? Could it be 2 people and a kid? Accessory dwellings are really supposed to be for housing, not rental income
Yeah, it's
necessarily. I mean,
Yeah,
it could
it
be
was more
both.
like additional family members.
Yeah, and so that was something on here. It's not on my radar to take a look. I have never had any. To be perfectly honest, there's not probably a lot of policing of how many people are living in your ADU.
Was I reading recently about encouraging accessory dwellings
Mhm.
as a way of,
Alleviating,
yeah,
housing
Housing
issues, yeah.
issues. Mhm.
right,
I've heard a few things about that.
Yeah.
Recently, and increasingly designers and builders are specializing in effectively full-time rental income properties as within the ADU
Mhm.
sort of footprint and then the ADU requirements on the law.
Mhm.
Because usually there's a square footage maximum for an
Right.
ADU and things like that, depending on the city.
There was a fascinating thing this week, and I think it's in Brunswick. People who are turning a part of their farm into a tiny village development.
Yeah.
Allowing people to bring their own tiny houses
Mhm.
on, and the community then has, owns all the utilities and
Yeah.
has responsibility. But I don't know where in our ordinances that possibility
It's
exists.
not really. We've had a couple of people ask us about that actually, but we don't, that's one of those, like, let's make sure our ordinances are modern, right? And these new ideas.
Right,
But we don't accommodate that right now. It would have to be a contract zone.
and then
because,
you have to think of amenities.
well, but you think about a tiny home project
Sure.
in a village concept around a central thing. You've got solar panels and so on, so you begin to make it self-sustaining in some
Yeah.
ways. As
Yes,
a place where, singles or couples could live.
Yeah.
With LD 2003, have we seen a lot more ADUs go up in town or?
No, honestly, no. We were already ahead of LD 2003. We've allowed ADUs for quite some time, so I don't.
You
don't have
gotta
a lot of
have the
impact on
land
it.
space
Yeah.
for it, that's the
But no,
challenge.
like, do we see typically every year, like how often are we seeing people adding ADUs or is that pretty standard?
I could get the number for you, but it's pretty regular. We do them pretty regularly. Probably maybe a month, I would guess. I mean, it's a pretty common thing. But the thing about them is the thing I struggle with the ADUs is the first person that comes in, you come in and you get your permit, you sign this affidavit that you're not gonna rent it, you live there, yada, yada, and then you sell it for 5 years. I don't have any way to really make sure that the new people, unless they call me, do the right thing. And they do call. A lot of people do call. When I can tell when a new property goes on that has a unit in it, and there's one right now that's for sale. So I've gotten a few calls, but and that's when we have our enforcement issues. People, neighbors are complaining, hey, they've listed this on Airbnb, it's an ADU.
Yeah.
With a mother-in-law. Let's see.
But if that's documented, right?
Mhm.
And then somebody looking at the title on behalf of the buyer, they'll
They
see
should,
theoretically, they'll
They
call the town and say, hey, wait a minute.
they should.
There are limitations.
60% of it.
And that's true for affordable housing too. I mean, you have to have a
Mhm.
process for it.
They should. Let's see, concentrate housing within mixed use areas, kind of like, okay, we're doing that. Scarborough's economy, this one is for, ZEDCO and LRPC, so land use regulations that encourage, I think that goes into our conversation we've been talking about. That was really the only, crossover we had with this one, is ZEDCO.
That though speaks to the conversation we had about what was that, the light industrial district and those,
right,
those other like weird triangular parcels over on the other side of the turnpike,
right.
or triangular zones. That is an outstanding item for us, I think.
No,
It's not
no.
good,
I don't anticipate talking about LI ever again.
Well, I'm actually thinking about those other, the zones that are further out towards the South Portland border.
Oh, like the, North Scarborough? Those
Yeah,
little
they're,
TBC,
they're
yeah,
like
yeah,
3 or 4
yeah,
triangular shapes.
little village.
Yeah,
pockets.
that were designed with the idea of the sewers coming across. It hasn't come across and they remain kind of stuck.
Oh, Running Hill. is
The running hill, yeah,
different.
exactly,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes. So, because, and that might not be a zoning issue, that comes back to what do we do about a sewer and running hill?
right, that's true. That one's on the list too. but
Okay, yeah.
it's farther down.
Okay, got it.
Let's see. This one, then we get into Connect Oak Hill and the Downs. I mean, this is just ongoing, crossroads plan development activity. Complete Streets policy, GP cog is managing. We had a CIP project and they just kicked that off. We're still in the very first phase where they're working out the details with the consultant. Improved network design by requiring street connectivity when new developments being proposed. This one, we have the baseline for this. I don't think we necessarily have the teeth yet for this, for planning board to do this. It's a great example of when we changed Payne Road. I'm just gonna say it out loud to me. Everybody knows that we've got to take care of this. When we changed the alignment of Payne Road and we created a 4th intersection and we gave a free light to the woman that lives there, we should have as a town said, we're gonna give you this, we're paying for it, but we want to cross access easement across the front of your property. So the other sides of the property can access it. Down there next to the Marshview project, when we realigned Payne and we created a
I'm sorry, yes.
Orange light
flag
arrangement.
intersection. We did the same thing at the Jeep dealership, opposite of Scarborough Downs Road. They have a light into their property.
Crossroads, yeah.
But do we have a,
No,
okay,
so I'm just saying, we need to probably put that, codify that, so that's kind of
Yeah.
how we go about that.
yeah, those 2 intersections both are bad intersections,
mm,
from a conceptual perspective.
And again, no sidewalks on both sides.
Correct, that's right.
We did update our commercial design standards, so sidewalks are required now. They're not like this optional thing. So if we don't, as a town, think it's time for you to build them, you do have to pay no matter what, but I'm very much a proponent of sidewalks to nowhere.
Mhm.
I don't care. Sidewalks everywhere, because they will connect.
You find that people oppose construction of sidewalks. And again, I'm referring to my past life. But people on Suffolk County, New York, residents would often oppose the construction of sidewalks because they felt that was too urban. Too urban.
That happened in Seattle, quite a bit.
Pardon me?
It happened in Seattle quite a bit.
Maybe in some of the neighborhoods, what we've been doing recently with these small little pocket neighborhoods,
Mhm.
where we have a requirement for them to build a sidewalk on one side, we're actually say, no, don't build that sidewalk for those 4 lots, build a sidewalk on the primary street. So we've done that on Pine Point. So the Marsh Bend project is not building an internal sidewalk, but they're making a connection from Dunstan Landing down, and they'll be putting in an RFP. So we're piecemealing our sidewalks. Trestle Way on Highland Ave is making a missing connection, and so far, we haven't gotten a lot of.
Good.
There's usually a lot of sidewalks being used. A lot of
Yeah.
sidewalks being
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
So, I have not seen, at least in our area, any.
We get
resistance. In fact,
continual
more,
asking
more.
for sidewalks
Yeah.
and pedestrian ways, and there's trails everywhere where there are no sidewalks.
Oh,
you can tell
yeah.
People still walk. It's
Yeah.
definitely a thing there.
It's one of the things in our survey, every time we do the community survey, where people always say we want more sidewalks or, you know. our
That's
current
really
sidewalks.
nice.
Yeah.
It keeps the kids safer
Yeah.
also.
Yeah, there's a lot. Well, the Blue Point, there's a huge demand for more sidewalks. And the streets that have sidewalks end up attracting more kids and attracting more walkers and dog walkers and all the rest.
Sure.
And nobody seems to have a problem with that. They just want more sidewalks to encourage that on the other streets that don't.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, to get places, yeah.
So the more we add, the more we need to be able to snowplow.
Right.
And that's part of the trails and
Yeah.
sidewalks plan is how, okay, great, we build them, but we have to plan for maintenance.
Yeah.
And then this last one is institute shared parking by developing new parking standards. We spent a few meetings last year talking
Yeah.
about parking,
Yes,
and I don't think any of us know enough about parking to make changes. I
Good.
just determined
Yeah,
that.
there's a difficulty. I think the planning board gets uncomfortable when as somebody starts to say shared parking,
Mhm,
because exactly
mhm.
what does that mean? And how do you get there? So my thought would be, it would be very helpful if we actually had an expert in shared parking
Mhm.
come and explain what it is, how folks look at it to determine what's shared, when is it shared.
Mhm.
I mean, I've got a vague notion, but as we're running now into the town center of the Downs, the question of shared parking is now crucial, because all of a sudden, well, we're going to have these number of lots that are gonna be shared, and then we'll take up these spaces on the street. You know, we're going to count our parking as part of the spaces on the street. I'm thinking, wait a minute. I thought spaces on the street were somebody coming down, they wanna run into a store, they park in. But you guys are counting it as your parking. So,
But what you just said, it is their parking.
well, it is,
Because
it is, and
It is a different.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it is and it isn't. It's their parking and there's somebody else's parking who wants to run across the street. In other words, nobody owns the
Well-
street parking the way somebody, an apartment complex may own their parking
That's
area.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's, well, and that's, as we have more quote unquote urban center areas, whether it's the Downs or whether it's Dunstan. The notion of what is street parking and how do we include it when we're thinking about capacity for their area for development becomes more front and center.
Well, we've asked for a scorecard to say,
Yeah.
you know, who's reserving what street.
Mhm.
You know, that, so that we can, because at some point, the planning board is likely to have to say, I'm sorry. Everybody's claimed all of the street parking.
Mhm.
Nobody can claim it from now on. You all have to have all of these spaces in back of your.
Or you start, or at that point, do we start then looking at the zoning and say, we don't need as many spaces per unit as we
That's
historically done?
Why I think we need a concession.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
That,
We
you know,
looked
that
at that
becomes
apartment complex in South Portland
Mhm,
that was on a main street.
mhm.
And they had their own parking inside
Hmm.
the complex, but they also have a lot of street
Mhm.
parking right there.
Well, and Portland does this all the time on,
I mean, you have to,
Yeah.
because you can't invent land.
so you're right, we don't know enough. Totally
Yeah.
agree, but it is the type of thing where we're going down a good pathway and it would be great to reinitiate that.
Yeah. And as I said, it's easy to say, well, it's gonna be shared. And what does
By
that
whom?
mean?
And what hours?
By whom, what hours?
right,
Show me the figures,
right.
you know, because if you're saying, this apartment is, this area that's gonna be used by apartments. Is also gonna be shared with restaurants, but wait a minute, because restaurants. If they're open in the evening, that's the same time as people are coming back from work. And want to park in their apartment parking, so, and we have a giant parking area now. In the town center at the Downs, it's starting to be filled in. And I can see problems coming up.
Well, it's interesting, I was in Atlanta for an elder care facility conference. And we toured a facility in North Atlanta that included, you know, not 55 plus, it's really assisted living and nursing care. Plus, workforce housing, plus doctors and dentist offices. And they worked with the Atlanta folks and had a much reduced footprint of parking. Because the argument is the people who are workforce housing are gone when the people are using the dentist and doctor's offices. So you've got a natural balance there. And then your elder care facility, you've got your workers, some of whom are living on site. And those folks don't generally have or can use cars. Which is the target market for that particular facility. So you ended up having about 300 units of elder care, 300 units of workforce housing, and about 40 offices worth of doctors and dentists things, with the parking equivalent to half of one of the residential buildings.
How
So-
did that work?
Very well. They told us it worked really well. The little tour they gave us, but it was a little tour, so I'm not sure how well.
And the interesting thing, I think, when you travel abroad is you see that people, if parking is not super convenient, if you can, you will walk.
Right.
And you
Right.
will find an off, you know, it's like it's not a thing.
It's not super
Because
convenient,
the
I'll take the
cars,
bus.
and so I think we're at that weird, like the Downs is trying to create that sort of hybrid. It's not super convenient, but it's convenient over here. You know, walking thing is definitely a learning curve. for
What
us as
happens to
we
people who
continue.
go shopping and have a lot of packages to carry, a lot of bags of stuff to carry? If they're not gonna want to walk, they're gonna want to pull up to the store, park near enough to the
Well,
store.
I'll tell you, enough people I see carrying bags back and forth, or walking on the sidewalk, who go to Hannaford, and they'll have 1 or 2 shopping bags.
Ah,
They may go
okay.
every day, they may go every other
Right, I
day.
understand.
So it's not like you go to Costco and you get a carload of stuff, you're going every day to get,
Right.
your milk, your eggs, or whatever.
Yeah, I lived overseas long enough that my shopping patterns changed where I shop every day. I have very little in my refrigerator. I have a giant refrigerator that is probably 25% full because I shop every day. And I buy one little bag and that's all I have.
And you have your string bag, your European.
No,
string
I
bag?
actually get the paper bags, use them as garbage bags. That's a longer story. But yeah, you change your shopping patterns.
Even when you bike,
Yeah,
because my
correct, yeah.
panniers will only hold so much, you have
Correct.
2 shopping bags.
And then once you get into that mode, it kind of is a great way of living. You use less stuff.
Yeah.
And you think about
You probably waste less stuff.
you're much more focused on how
You're
much
walking,
packaging you're using.
And you're walking and, getting more exercise, yeah.
So anyway, it's a good thing.
So we could put maxes on how big supermarkets could be. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got through the whole spreadsheet.
Right.
And so I think that was really helpful, and I think I have direction if you all are comfortable with what we'll talk about for quite some time. We'll start to look at TBC zones and
Right.
what we can do
Yeah.
to make those more manageable.
Two things. First of all, I don't want to open this up to half an hour discussion, but the sewer across the highway has always been an issue, a discussion point. And 10, 15 years ago, our recollection of that comp plan was it was recommended that we do it. And then it got a little watered down in the last comp plan. Where does that discussion stand now? Is there any?
We had some discussion and council discussed it. I think if there, did you go into detail with your goal setting?
We did a little bit. I
Good.
mean, I think a lot of it was brought about because of the LI district and
Right.
having sewer and water over there. I think the concern that was shared, that kind of people kind of said, okay, well, let's deal with that later, was what is the impact of putting it out in the RF and how could that proliferate development? So is there an unintended consequence? And I think that's where we left it. So that might be a good discussion for this group to have and debate as well, to kind of just understand, like, with what we have, is this something we want to do, and what's the recommendation? Because again, I could see an RH how, in order to enable that type of district, we need something. So either we commit to do it and keep RH the same, or we don't do it and we change what RH is.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big question for there. And then the rest is like, well, what about the other part of town, and like, what do we want to do there?
Okay. So right now, there's no discussion of the town footing that bill.
Well, we did, I mean, there was a,
Astronomical number.
I think there was something that was funded in a CIP years ago.
Right.
To do that was revoked because it had been a decade since it was put in there, and we're like, well, we probably need to revisit that. So that really kind of cleared that off as like a possibility. So if we do want to add it back in to fund it, again, I think we would need to decide, is that really what we want to do?
So,
What is the
Was
magnitude?
the discussion way back was environmental based.
Sure. No, just in terms of cost, I don't know if any,
Oh, God, I think
It was 2 million in
it
the
was two
CIP.
something, 12
Years
years
ago.
It's
ago.
probably.
Now, the last number I recall seeing. was
okay, yeah,
12 million, I mean, some.
Yeah.
I just have no concept of how big the bread box is, so,
It's
yeah,
good.
okay.
so does the town have central sewage treatment plants where sewage, do you have
Yes.
like a central,
It's down in Black Hole.
Yeah.
Crouch down. That's where the sewer plant is.
okay, so if you, so any of the sewage that's going to be pumped from across the highway will be piped to that
All
plant?
sewage
All
in
sewage.
town goes to that. site.
Okay, thank you.
There's only one.
Yeah, you would
Including
probably have
stuff
to
on-
build a new,
on
and we
Pine
don't
Point-
have control.
does Pine
over
Point
the
shift to
sewer.
Old Orchard or something, or?
Well, I don't know where it goes, but there's only one plant.
It stays in Scarborough.
And it's at Crouch Neck and all.
And
And is
sewage-
there an outfall?
Yeah, I'm sure there is. Yes. I mean, it's heavily regulated.
No, I understand that.
But yeah, it ultimately dumps into the ocean.
Cause they're doing a bunch of work on the pumping station in Blue Point,
That's a
Mhm.
pumping station.
and I just didn't know where, where.
I don't know whether it goes, whether we share Old Orchard system. I
Think so?
It's a different water system, cause we're in a different water system than.
Yeah.
And you gotta, you know, if you're doing a new development, you gotta pay a capacity, a fee to save space.
Mhm.
And the golf course, Such golf course years ago was proposed as a commercial business park. And as I recall, they put a big number.
No.
They have to, it's still, unless it's been returned, I don't think it has, they paid to reserve capacity. And then when we were working on the Amazon project
Mhm.
that died. There was a lot of discussion about that, because Amazon was going to effectively have to pay for it.
Right.
And one of the issues was, we put sewer over there, do we open up sewage to other sections and residential development and blah. So it sort of flipped itself in terms of, that would be something that would allow for more residential development west of the highway, which might be a good thing because we'd eliminate on-site septic, but would be a bad thing for just overall growth.
Deliberation of growth.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to ask you about, are you paying attention to this bill that's going through the legislature to expand the definition of subdivision?
For the 5, 3 versus 5, yeah. There's a lot of bills right now going through for growth management, all sorts of planning.
Okay.
We have one, there's one that, there's a couple of growth management ones that are changing the comp plan process.
Yeah.
and, Yeah. We have a really good, Jenny Franceschi, she's the planning director for Westbrook, and she's our Maine Association of Planners legislative review chair or whatever, and so she does a really good job of sending us updates.
So you had other items in your package.
It was all just really
Just back up
backup
for this
for,
discussion.
yeah, ultimately, I think the spreadsheet really is the meat of it, and then we continue to revisit it, so.
All
I
right,
think I.
so are we done with this?
Real quick, and it's really this, the council goals, when will you refresh those?
So every January, well, actually, I think we talked about having a workshop in June.
Okay.
To check in on where we are and if there's any adjustments we may want to make, so.
As opposed to June 4th.
Yeah, it would be the last meeting in June.
Okay,
What kind of workshop would that be?
to review the
Yeah.
goals.
I think it would be, and I don't know if it's gonna be a workshop or if it'll just be a action item on our agenda, but make sure that we. Pause and reflect on the things that we said we wanted to do.
So when will that be?
June 18th. Not currently on an agenda, but that's what we've talked about, with the chair and vice chair and Tom. That we need to do a check-in.
Just curious.
Yeah. So. We've got a lot of goals to do. so-
Yeah.
If you start looking at them, I
We're
mean,
making
a lot
progress.
of, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
we've ticked,
Some are done, and
we've
then
ticked a
some,
few, yeah.
I've got Tree City, I've got short-term rentals, we've done open space, vulnerabilities, what's going.
Okay, item 6, member updates, anybody? Have anything?
Zoning board been quiet.
Not quite related to that, but who are the candidates for the open chair?
We have 3 people running. Chrissy Mauer is running again. She ran in the fall. We have
Kane?
Larry Kane and Donald Scott Dunzar.
Gonzar, he just, yeah, I just saw his sign start to pop up
Yep,
this
so we have
morning.
3 people running for Don's seat for a 1.5-year term, and then for school board, there are 3 people running for 3 vacant seats, so that one's not contested.
Staff updates.
I think you all know where we are with everything. See, our planning board, we have, well, I won't talk about that. I'll get that information. I don't have anything.
And we meeting here just because
They
today
have,
worked
well, I
well.
went upstairs, they have early voting, so they take in our room, and the other room is, the tables are huge and weird, and I would have had to move them all, I didn't want to.
Because this is good for the small.
I like
group.
It is.
I like it.
No,
This
no,
could be a
I
problem.
knew we were gonna have a really small group, so I thought this would be fine.
One thing, if you guys haven't taken the school survey yet, that closes on May 12th.
Right.
So just make sure you share that with your friends to provide feedback. I know we're still trying to figure out the site. And so knowing what solution and what site may also kind of prompt discussion about that particular zone and what the
Yeah.
future looks like. So I think that's an interesting topic once that's known, like how this group may review the zoning surrounding it to just.
So this would replace the proposal that went down.
Yep.
Okay.
But the 2 items up for adoption, one of which looks a lot like the one that went down,
Mhm.
and the other one would involve tearing down 8 corners and putting a new neighborhood school in a new place.
Yep.
And then doing the consolidation of everything, but that's all kind of.
John, do you know when the location will be public?
I think if things move forward, there may be item on our May 21st agenda
Okay.
to potentially have the council authorize Tom to negotiate with a landowner. So that it could be as early as May 21st, but they're still doing a lot of vernal pool testing, and I understand at the sites that they're considering, and so that's really that could really determine whether a site is ruled out or not, and may delay when we come public with the site.
There are a couple of weeks to do vernal pool studies.
I think they're expecting the result, they were supposed to get the results this week, and so I don't know if the rain, if that's made it challenging to get the results in. Or to do the
At least
testing.
provides you a nice stress to the.
Yeah.
Stress test. So.
So there is a site identified.
There's a couple of sites. And I think that hopefully those will get narrowed down very quickly, and I don't know if it's on the building committee agenda on Monday to make a recommendation. But we've been talking to landowners just to kind of get prepared for when the site is selected to really hopefully move that forward.
I would say from Transportation Committee. Thank you to John. We're going to be entering into transit study to see with Metro what makes sense as far as both fixed route and what they call micro route. Micro route is kind of an on-demand. But I'm just really excited about it. I think it will give us potential, particularly depending on school locations.
Yeah.
To tie into some of that, so to let you know that that's going to be happening and doesn't obligate us, but it provides a plan.
It is, we talked a bit in that about making sure that Metro is aware of. Their picture of Scarborough is probably a good 6 or 7 years old in their heads. So keeping them aware of the changes in the downs, the development patterns that are emerging in 8 corners, the ongoing conversation about Route 114, things about that, will be part of their conversation in a way that, their picture of Scarborough reminds me of Scarborough I knew when I was in high school. So, it's good to get them moving faster in their thinking. So, but that should be really.
So they're going to take a look at the intersection of Route 1 and Gorham Road.
They'll look at a budget, Route 1 will. First off, there's a metro already that goes on Route 1 and it effectively just bypasses Scarborough.
Right.
It goes
It's
to,
through Scarborough.
it goes from South Portland to Saco and Benefit.
Mhm.
So they're gonna look at what's on Route 1 now, where turns might be onto either 114 to the Downs, etc. They also do a lot of work for the big routes on
Mhm.
where turnaround places would be, so where the.
Like the library,
Yeah,
Right.
that kind of thing, maybe even
Exactly.
Hannaford, so that, you know.
No, what I was thinking was that intersection, during the time when people are coming home from work, that intersection backs up, I- along the road that crosses Route 1,
Like
So-
Black Point,
114 to Blackboard.
Black Point. And I guess the other side is Gorham.
yeah, because
Yeah.
it'll black up almost to Eastern Road.
That's
in the
right,
Evening, yeah.
that's right.
But yeah, what they'll look at is, number one, it's a demand issue. It's where are places where buses can move.
Mhm.
And then also they're thinking about the sustainability of their route network. So they don't want to have out and back types of routes. They would rather have them curl around. So come in Scarborough here, go through 114, then come back and go back to Maine Wall Road or something like that. So it will be a very thoughtful study, and it will tell us, I think, a lot too about how our growth patterns are emerging and especially for the Oak Hill or for the town center, village center, they'll give us really good information, so.
30 people on a bus versus 30 people in a car.
Of course,
So
of course.
you get some bang for the buck.
Mhm.
And for the planning board, what's on our next agenda is the town center of the Downs, the market basket, the junior, the smaller commercial building, the mixed use building, and the satellite parking lot. So second review of all of those. We passed the conservation subdivision on Highland Avenue called Trestle. The Trestle Way or the Trestle Way, which is now, I think it was 10 lots. So that's adding to Highland Avenue, that whole area. Right at, right past the old house. When you get onto Highland Avenue, about 100 feet down.
They had asked to rezone that to R2 a few years ago, didn't they?
Well, they tried to in a different process. A
Yeah, okay.
different, different area, which is now actually the work area.
Okay,
So that's really filling in a lot of Highland Avenue
Yeah.
and down to Chamberlain. And through Chamberlain and the houses on Chamberlain, which kind of back up to the train tracks are selling for what, 750,000? 800, yeah.
Even more reason why the Eastern Trail needs to be completed, to get people off of Highland, oh my gosh.
Yeah, so, but anyhow, there will be sidewalks, yeah, that's. So it will connect actually to the road, Black Point Road.
Mhm.
So down to the athletic field, I think,
Mhm.
right? Yeah,
gotcha.
Or to the church.
or to the church, yeah.
Haven't gone across the street.
Okay, anything else? Next meeting is Friday the 13th. Friday the
Is
13th.
it a few? Yeah. It's a few.
Oh, the rules on Friday, happens to be the 13th. Is anybody suspicious?
It's a lucky day for me. My mom was born on the 13th.
Oh, that's nice. Okay. Move to adjourn. Need a second? All those in favor, please say aye. Good, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really good.
Meeting.
With